Imagine being so convinced of your weapon's superiority, you call it invincible. For years, this wasn't just a boast. It was the deep-seated belief of Japanese tank crews. Their confidence, however, was about to shatter in the most brutal way imaginable. From the windswept plains of Manchuria to the humid, vine-choked jungles of Southeast Asia, the Type 95 Heigo light tank had earned a fearsome reputation. For the Imperial Japanese Army, it was more than just a machine. It was a symbol of innovation and unstoppable force, perfectly adapted for the conflicts they envisioned. Early engagements against poorly equipped Chinese forces were more devastating demonstrations of power than battles. The Heigo's 37mm cannon tore through flimsy fortifications, and its twin machine guns scythed down infantry with terrifying efficiency. Japanese tankers gained invaluable combat experience, mastering their craft in an environment where their tanks faced virtually no anti-tank threats. This era of overwhelming superiority forged a dangerous myth. The Hago was an invincible weapon. Even when confronted by more modern Soviet armor, the faster, harder-hitting BT-5s and BT-7s during the intense border clashes at Khalkhin Gol in 1939, the full implications of the Hago's limitations were tragically understated. Despite suffering significant losses, the Japanese leadership, perhaps swayed by tactical victories or an unwavering faith in their troops' fighting spirit, largely ignored the glaring vulnerabilities revealed in those brutal tank duels. Instead, they focused on refining tactics and crew training, allowing the myth of the Heigo's invulnerability to persist, reinforced by subsequent triumphs. When the wider Pacific War erupted in December 1941, the Hago's legend only grew. In the lightning campaign through Malaya, British commanders were astounded as Japanese tanks, thought to be too heavy for the dense terrain, carved paths through rubber plantations and jungle trails, spearheading a rapid, relentless advance towards Singapore. The Hago's mobility proved crucial, catching defenders off guard and pushing the limits of what was believed possible for armored warfare in such an environment. The Philippines saw similar successes, with Hagos landing alongside invasion forces, providing vital infantry support, and even engaging American M3 Stuart light tanks in the very first tank-on-tank battles in the Pacific. While the M3 boasted thicker armor, the Hago's aggressive tactics, superior numbers in localized attacks, and sheer ability to operate in close-quarters jungle fighting often gave Japanese crews the edge. These early sweeping victories, achieved across diverse and challenging terrains, profoundly reinforced the Japanese belief in their tank. Tank crews trusted their machines implicitly. Commanders relied on their armor as a shield and their guns as decisive tools. From their perspective, the Hago was performing exactly as designed. A mobile, reliable, and utterly effective instrument of conquest, perfectly suited for the grand ambitions of the Imperial Army. But this profound confidence, this almost spiritual trust in their machines, was built upon a foundation of fighting vastly inferior opponents. It was a dangerous assumption that the Hago was genuinely capable against any enemy, rather than a vehicle optimized for a specific, limited scenario. A myth, meticulously crafted by early successes, was about to be brutally and irrevocably shattered. The stark, unforgiving truth of the Hago's profound inadequacies against a new, unforeseen threat would soon be revealed in the most shocking way imaginable. They had been convinced their tanks were invincible. They were wrong. But how did this invincible tank come to be? What was the design philosophy that bred such confidence, yet contained the seeds of its ultimate failure? That question takes us back to 1933, when the Japanese Imperial Army, envisioning a new kind of warfare, issued a revolutionary set of requirements. The Army realized their workhorse, the Type 89 medium tank, crawling along at a mere 15 miles per hour, was utterly inadequate for the rapid, mechanized advances they planned for Manchuria and China. They needed a tank that could keep pace with motorized infantry, travel at 25 miles per hour cross-country, navigate rough terrain, and importantly, be simple enough for their industrial base to churn out in quantity. The Army Technical Bureau laid down the challenge: a 7-ton light tank with a 37mm gun, capable of resisting rifle and machine gun fire. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries took up the mantle, with engineer Tomio Hara leading the charge. His most brilliant innovation was the bell crank suspension system, a simple, robust design that would become a hallmark of Japanese tanks. By 1934, the first prototype was ready, and it was a revelation. It zipped across paved roads at 28 mph, maintained a respectable 15 to 20 mph cross-country, and boasted a turning radius that defied its tracked nature. The bell crank suspension absorbed shocks, allowing it to traverse terrain that would have crippled other vehicles. And powering this jungle-hopping speed demon was a mechanically reliable Mitsubishi air-cooled diesel engine, pumping out 120 horsepower. This diesel engine was a source of immense pride, significantly reducing fire risk compared to gasoline-powered tanks and using fuel readily available across Japan's empire. With a 130-mile operational range, the Heigo was a mobile, reliable marvel. However, even in these early trials, small cracks appeared in the design. The suspension, while innovative, had a violent pitching tendency over rough ground, making accurate firing nearly impossible. Engineer Tomio Hara addressed this with added braces, creating the Manchurian suspension, which improved the ride but never fully eliminated the tank's bone-jarring instability. But the truly fatal flaws were born from compromise. When presented to the Army Technical Bureau in 1935, infantry representatives raised concerns. 12 mm of armor, they argued, was simply not enough for frontline assaults. Cavalry commanders countered that the tank's superior speed and mobility compensated for its thin skin. And against the enemies Japan expected to fight, Chinese forces with minimal anti-tank capabilities or lightly armored Soviet tanks, this seemed a reasonable calculation. The Type 95 Heigo was officially adopted, but the cold, hard numbers told a different story. At its thickest, on the turret and upper hull, the Heigo boasted a mere 12 millimeters of steel. The roof and floor, a paltry 9 millimeters. Elsewhere, just 6 millimeters. This was armor designed to stop rifle bullets, not withstand the brutal realities of modern tank warfare. Inside, the 3-man crew was packed into a space so cramped it bordered on claustrophobia. The driver sat in the front left, peering through a limited viewport. Next to him, a hull machine gunner operated a 7.7mm weapon. But the most impossible burden fell upon the commander, who occupied the turret alone. He had no seat standing throughout combat, his head often exposed for better visibility. Can you imagine? This single man had to command the tank, directing the driver and communicating with other units, if his tank even had a radio, which only 1 in 4 did. He had to operate the main 37mm cannon, loaded himself in a tiny space, and then, as if that weren't enough, operate a second machine gun mounted in the rear of the turret. Command, shoot, load, and maintain situational awareness, all simultaneously, in a hand-cranked turret? American tankers who later examined captured Hagos simply marveled that anyone could function effectively under such conditions. It was a superhuman, frankly impossible task. This design, a marvel of speed and maneuverability, was also a steel coffin, waiting for a single, well-placed shot. But its real test, and the moment of brutal revelation, awaited it on a small Pacific island. Imagine the terror. You're safe in your tank, then a torrent of machine gun fire rips through your armor. This wasn't some new superweapon. It was the standard .50 caliber, and it was about to change everything. For years, the Type 95 Hago had been the symbol of Japanese armored might. Its crews, having swept through China, Malaya, and the Philippines, held an unwavering belief in their tank's invincibility, confident its light armor was perfectly adequate for the war they were fighting. But that confidence, honed by years of success, was about to shatter on a small Pacific island called Saipan. June 1944. The island was a vital strategic prize, bringing B-29 bombers within range of Japan's home islands. Japanese Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, facing an overwhelming American invasion, knew he had to strike before the Marines fully consolidated their beachhead. His plan, a desperate, coordinated night counterattack, spearheaded by Colonel Takashi Gudo's 9th Tank Regiment, comprised of 44 Hagos and Chihas. In the pre-dawn darkness of June 17th, the Japanese tank column rumbled forward. Diesel engines coughed to life, tracks clanked, and the familiar vibration filled each cramped compartment. Crews, many seasoned by previous campaigns, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. They were confident, ready to drive the enemy back into the sea. Marine sentries, hunkered in their foxholes, heard them coming. The distinctive growl of engines, the clatter of tracks, an unmistakable symphony of approaching armor. Weapons were readied. But what happened next caught both sides completely off guard. As the Japanese tanks emerged from the gloom, Marine machine gunners opened fire. Not with anti-tank guns, not with artillery, but with their ubiquitous M2 Browning .50 caliber heavy machine guns. These were infantry support weapons, designed to engage aircraft and destroy light vehicles, never intended to defeat tanks. Yet, as the armor-piercing rounds screamed across the battlefield, something horrifying unfolded for the Japanese crews. The Hago's maximum armor was 12 mm thick. The .50 caliber armor-piercing round, firing a 12.7 mm projectile at over 2,900 feet per second, could penetrate 23 mm of face-hardened steel at 200 meters. Simple arithmetic revealed the Hago's fatal flaw. The rounds didn't just dent the tanks. They didn't ricochet harmlessly. They penetrated cleanly, decisively. At close range, some rounds went completely through the thin armor, entering one side of the tank and exiting the other. Inside the tanks, the experience was a revelation of terror. A Marine machine gunner reported seeing sparks inside a Hago as his tracer rounds punched through the front hull. Another watched as a commander in his turret slumped forward, struck down by a round that had sliced through the protective steel. A third aimed for an engine compartment, seeing his bullets pierce the thin 6 mm rear deck, seizing the diesel engine and bringing the vehicle to a halt. What would you do in this situation? Imagine the chilling sound of bullets ripping through what you believed was your unbreachable sanctuary. Japanese tank crews couldn't process it. They had trained for years, fought in battles where enemy fire bounced off their hulls. Now, infantry support weapons were turning their tanks into death traps. How could this be? Their tanks were supposed to protect them. This was the fundamental premise of armored warfare. The realization was devastating. If machine guns could penetrate their armor, what chance did they have against anything heavier? One captured Japanese tank officer, grappling with the unthinkable, speculated that the Americans must have developed some new, secret weapon, an advanced ammunition disguised as a standard machine gun round. He simply couldn't accept that a conventional heavy machine gun could defeat a tank. It defied every lesson he had ever learned. This wasn't just a tactical defeat. It was a fundamental revelation about the nature of modern warfare, a profound sense of betrayal by the very equipment they had trusted with their lives. But to truly understand why the Hago failed so spectacularly, we need to look beyond the battlefield and into the factories. One tank was a symbol of innovation, the other a behemoth of industrial might. The clash between the Hago and the Sherman wasn't just a battle of machines, but a testament to an unimaginable production gap. As American Marines grappled with the shock of the Hago's vulnerability, a deeper, more fundamental truth was emerging. The two tanks represented vastly different philosophies of war and the industrial capacities behind them. The Type 95 Hago, weighing in at a mere 7.4 tons, had a maximum armor thickness of just 12 millimeters. Barely enough to stop heavy machine gun fire, as Saipan had so brutally shown. Its primary armament was a 37mm gun, effective against infantry and early light tanks, but entirely inadequate against its new adversaries. Its three-man crew, with the commander burdened by the impossible task of commanding, loading, and firing the main gun from a cramped, unseated turret, highlighted a design constrained by resources and past doctrines. Most critically, only 1 in 4 Hagos carried a radio, forcing reliance on visual signals, a system that crumbled in the chaos of battle. Now, let's look at the M4 Sherman, the workhorse of the U.S. Marines at Saipan. The M4A2 variant alone weighed 31.8 tons, more than 4 times the Hago. Its frontal hull armor was 51 millimeters thick, angled at 56 degrees, providing protection equivalent to roughly 75 millimeters of vertical steel against anti-tank fire. The Sherman's 75mm main gun could penetrate the Hago's armor from over a mile away, rendering any Japanese return fire utterly futile. Its 5-man crew worked in dedicated positions: a commander with an all-around vision cupola, a gunner with power traverse and telescopic sights, a dedicated loader, and 2 drivers. Every Sherman had a radio, enabling seamless coordination. Its gyro-stabilized gun even allowed reasonably accurate firing while moving, a capability completely alien to Japanese tanks. Imagine being a Hago commander, trying to spot targets, load your gun, and command, all while standing in a confined space. Now picture a Sherman crew, each man with a specific job, a stable gun, and crystal-clear radio communication. Which tank would you rather be in? The qualitative differences were crushing, but the sheer numbers truly sealed the Hago's fate. Japan's industrial capacity, already strained by years of war in China and hampered by dwindling resources due to American submarine campaigns, simply could not compete. Total Hago production from 1936 to 1943 was approximately 2,300 tanks. While Japanese engineers did design more advanced tanks like the Type 3 Chi-Nu, only 100 Senku-6 were ever built. most saved for the final defense of the home islands, never reaching the battlefields where they might have made a difference. Contrast that with America's industrial might. The Detroit Tank Arsenal, a purpose-built Chrysler facility, produced 97 Sherman tanks in December 1942 alone. That was more tanks in a single month than Japan typically produced in an entire year. Fisher Tank Arsenal, another behemoth operated by General Motors, produced over 11,000 Shermans during the war. 10 major manufacturers, supported by countless subcontractors, churned out these machines. By the war's end, American factories had built in staggering 49,234 Sherman tanks. That's a 20-to-1 production advantage over the Hago, and that doesn't even account for the immense qualitative disparity. But this wasn't just about steel and engines. It was about people. Think of Rosie the Riveter. Thousands of American women, many new to heavy industry, worked tirelessly in these factories, welding armor plate, assembling turrets, and installing engines, proving that the nation's industrial capacity could be multiplied by tapping a previously overlooked workforce. Could you imagine a society pivoting its entire industrial base like that, almost overnight, to produce such a colossal war machine? This industrial chasm left Japanese tank units in an impossible situation. In subsequent battles across the Pacific, the Hago, a symbol of innovation in its time, was reduced to an obsolete death trap. On Tinian in July 1944, 7 Type 95s were destroyed in desperate counterattacks. On Peleliu, Japanese tanks were dug into caves, used as static pillboxes, their commanders having realized their futility in mobile combat. On Iwo Jima, Colonel Nishi's tanks were buried up to their turrets in volcanic ash, acting as fixed bunkers. Yet, even in these static roles, they remained vulnerable, still penetrable by .50 caliber machine guns, destroyed by bazookas, and incinerated by flamethrower tanks. The final, brutal revelation came at Okinawa in 1945. The Japanese committed 27 tanks against an American landing force of over 800. A 30-to-1 numerical disadvantage, compounded by an even greater qualitative gap. Most of the Japanese tanks were destroyed within hours. The battle a stark testament to the futility of courage against overwhelming industrial might. The raw numbers painted a grim picture. But the true impact of this industrial chasm was revealed not just in metal and firepower, but in the profound psychological toll and the enduring lessons learned by every soldier involved. After the war, American engineers tore down the Hago piece by piece. What they uncovered wasn't just a tank, but a stark revelation about the cost of fighting a modern war with yesterday's technology. Post-war, at facilities like the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, the Type 95 Hago was meticulously dismantled and analyzed. Experts confirmed what combat had already revealed. Its design was fundamentally flawed for the realities of modern armored warfare. They measured armor thickness, a mere 12 millimeters at its thickest, often less, finding it inadequate against anything more potent than rifle fire. The face-hardened steel, while effective against small arms, offered no meaningful resistance to dedicated anti-tank rounds or even the ubiquitous American .50 caliber heavy machine gun. Its internal layout was a study in claustrophobia and inefficiency. The lone commander, burdened with commanding, navigating, aiming, loading, and firing both main gun and rear machine gun, was a recipe for exhaustion and battlefield ineffectiveness. There was no proper seating, no power traverse for the turret, and vision ports offered minimal situational awareness, forcing dangerous exposure. The lack of reliable radios in most tanks made coordinated operations almost impossible. Every aspect, from the crude periscopes to the rudimentary gun controls, screamed of a design constrained by limited industrial capacity, resource scarcity, and a strategic vision rooted in earlier conflicts. American analysts, comparing the Hago to their own Sherman tanks, noted the stark contrast: spaciousness versus cramped quarters, multi-person turrets versus a single overloaded commander, robust armor versus thin steel, sophisticated fire control versus manual cranks, universal radios versus scarce communication. The Hago was a light tank suited for colonial warfare, not the industrial slugfest of World War II. For the Japanese, the Hago became a symbol of a bitter truth. It represented the impossible challenge they faced: fighting a global superpower with equipment never designed for such a conflict. The belief in their equipment's invincibility, nurtured by early successes against ill-equipped adversaries, shattered under the relentless torrent of American firepower. The psychological toll was immense. Tank crews, initially confident, grappled with the brutal clarity that their lives were protected by little more than sheet metal against modern weapons. It was a profound betrayal, not just of material, but of trust, as their leaders sent them to battle knowing their equipment was inadequate. They learned, at unimaginable cost, that courage and fighting spirit, while vital, could not overcome overwhelming material and technological disparity. Meanwhile, American forces derived different, but equally profound lessons. They learned the critical importance of industrial capacity, of an economy capable of producing overwhelming numbers of high-quality equipment. The sheer scale of American tank production, contrasted with Japan's struggling factories, underscored that modern warfare was as much an industrial contest as a military one. They learned the value of sound design philosophy, creating vehicles that prioritized crew protection, firepower, and coordination. And they learned a grim, practical lesson. Their standard infantry support weapons, particularly the M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun, were devastatingly effective against Japanese armor. There was no glory in these lopsided encounters, only a grim satisfaction that their weapons worked, that their industry had equipped them to survive. The Hago, ultimately, stands as a stark testament to the consequences of strategic miscalculation. It embodies Japan's impossible challenge in World War II, a nation attempting to compete with the world's industrial giants, with a military-industrial complex that simply couldn't keep pace. Its story, from perceived invincibility to brutal obsolescence, is a testament to the fact that in modern warfare, production capacity, design philosophy, and resource allocation are as critical as any tactical maneuver or act of heroism. It's a somber reflection on the human cost when nations send their soldiers to fight with yesterday's technology against tomorrow's industrial might. What do you think are the most enduring lessons from the Hago's tragic journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And let's continue this conversation.